Okay, we're gonna be ranking the Amazing Digital Circus episodes in order of how much I liked them. Not you, me, my opinion. Honestly, though, this was not easy for me to do because, you know, usually when I'm thinking of a show and like its worst episode, immediately one episode comes to mind like, oh yeah, that episode was like obviously way worse than the others. But for this show, it actually was a little bit hard for me. So this is like what I decided on as my final ranking, but take it with a grain of salt, to be honest, because one, it's still my opinion, and two, I'm not even 100% sure about it. So with that in mind, let's get into it. Sorry, lad, there's one more little disclaimer. Obviously, it has spoilers for the entire series. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it in detail, but if you haven't seen The Amazing Digital Circus, I wouldn't really recommend watching this. But if you don't care about spoilers, then now let's get into it. Like, now, actually, we're going to get into it. In last place is episode 4, aka The Fast Food Masquerade. I'm not going to apologize for putting this episode last because something had to be last. If you disagree about my pick, though, that's totally fine. The thing is, I do consider all episodes of the show to be pretty good. Like, none of them are terrible or unwatchable. However, compared to the rest of the episodes, episode 4 just feels kind of boring, which I get is the point of it. The theme is literally just a mundane day as a fast food worker. It's not supposed to be full of action, but like when every other episode has at least one portion of it dedicated to some kind of dangerous or exciting adventure, this one stands out in a bad way. Personally, I feel like episode 5 does a much better job at having a low stakes, relaxing environment. I don't completely dislike the chill vibe of this episode. In fact, I love the idea of seeing the cast being mellowed out and allowed to, relax, or not relax, but, not have to do some dangerous, high stress adventure. Having Jax not be an unlikable asshole was refreshing to see for once. I appreciate having Gangle fleshed out a lot more and seeing her mental state. I do think there could have been more though, but a moment I especially love was Pomni seeing Gummigoo for the first time again, and the realization that the moment they shared was just completely gone. It was chef's kiss. I really like it. But generally, I just don't think this episode was that good. I still like it, just not as much as the others. In 8th place, I have the series finale, episode 9, titled Remember. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I've only seen people having negative responses to this episode. Not because it's bad, but because they just expected so much more from it. And I mostly feel the same way, hence its placement in the ranking. If I wasn't thinking of this as the finale, it wouldn't have left such a bitter taste in the mouth, but because it is the final episode, the last piece of canon material that we will ever get out of the Amazing Digital Circus universe, it falls flat. So many loose ends left unresolved. For the sake of video length, I don't want to go too deep into it, but you guys watch the episode. You know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, then I'm sure lots of people have made videos on it that you can go and watch. For me though, I'm just gonna talk about its actual content, not the stuff that wasn't in it. My main grievance with the episode is the fact that 70% of its runtime is taken up by, you guessed it, Jax, a character who has already been the main focus, or at least gotten notable moments in numerous episodes. I think he actually got the most screen time out of the entire cast, with the sole exception of Pomni. Seriously though, for a show that claims to have an ensemble cast, it really is just Jax, oh, and more Jax. This is coming from someone who actually liked Jax on their initial viewing, and I still do, low-key. Like, seeing his backstory, like being immersed in it, seeing his thoughts, how he feels about himself, and getting to know why he, or at least part of the reason as to why he acted the way he did, was interesting. I liked that. But there shouldn't have been a sacrifice of every other character's arc and development just for his. I'm not even talking about the main cast, but having Ribbit and Kaufma reduced to just characters in Jax's life story was a little sad when they could have been introduced as their own people. Never did we ever get to see Ribbit or Kaufman's relationships with anyone else in the circus, or even like their identities outside of Jax. Maybe I'm asking too much for characters that we never even saw live, but centering them entirely around Jax was a letdown. Ribbit I can understand because, she was very important to Jax, but Kaufman could have been so much more. He was the most recent abstraction, and we could have had the circus members tell us about who he was, see more of his insight, why he actually abstracted, because he was a chill guy. But nah, oh well. I do like how this episode calls back to the pilot a lot. Like, both the final and first episode start and end in the exact same way, but slightly different. And I love that kind of writing pattern that makes it seem like the story is a circle. This doesn't make up for its pitfalls and how rushed its conclusion feels though. And I just want to stop talking about this episode now, because the more I do, the more I realize how much greater it could have been. But instead, it decided to disappoint. Just like everything does. Why does every show suck at ending now? Number 7, I have episode 7. How fitting is that? Titled The Beach Episode. I was so excited for this episode on release, and it delivered at the time, but looking back, it doesn't hit the same. I remember all the theories that emerged or were expanded upon after this episode dropped, all of which were so good, but knowing that almost none of them were true makes the whole episode feel kind of pointless. I mean, looking at it in relation to other episodes, this one just lacks the strong turning point or major reveal of information. But Fog, what about the ending of the adventure when it's implied Kane can control them? Well, does that info or implication become relevant ever again? Not really. Even the implication that, the first abstraction was almost like deliberately caused by Kane. Scratch. We see Scratch for 2 seconds. We never see him again. Nothing comes of it. That little implication at the end of the episode did nothing in the long run. The only other thing I can really think of as a progression is the humans getting mad at Kane for the adventure, leading to his inevitable breakdown. But that doesn't even happen in this episode, but rather is a result of this episode, meaning it doesn't count as like adding value to this episode because it didn't even occur in the runtime, making this entire episode essentially empty. We spend all the time doing this fake heist, which we're supposed to think is important, but it actually amounts to nothing. And while I love heist movies and seeing elements of that here, it was underdeveloped and wasted. Like, them wasting time looking for a key to the Chinese room. I know they didn't actually spend scenes on it, but like the fact that we were even looking for a key and it didn't need a key, it is so stupid. And the fact that genuinely nobody else except for Jax and maybe like Pomni Ragatha really even contributed to it. Like, Jax distracted Kane and also got like the admin key or whatever it was, and then Ponmi and Ragatha got the key, the hand key thingies. I forgot. But they did something. Zubul and Gengu don't do anything. More on that later. But this episode just wastes time showing us things they don't even need to. Like the Jax almost abstraction scene. I get that it's supposed to show that he's on the verge of abstracting, but we already know that. They showed us that last episode. The other thing we gained from that scene is that, he was close with Ribbit and Cosmo, but again, we already knew that. So genuinely, what was the point? We saw these things last episode. I'm not saying they shouldn't have shown Jax at all, but they could have used the time to actually give Zubul and Gengu something to do. And it might just be me, like maybe I wasn't watching the episodes properly, but I have to say it. Why does it feel like every conversation Zubul and Gengu have is the exact same? And when I say that, I don't mean like they're exactly the same, like they're talking about the same shit every time, but it has the exact same vibe and purpose every single time. Like, it's just someone reassuring the other every time, and it makes their dynamic so boring to watch. It gets to the point where Zubul feels more like Gengu's therapist than her friend. No shade, I actually like that shit, but like, come on. I don't want to keep saying negative things because I feel like I've just been ragging on this episode when I don't even think it's that bad. Like, the reveal at the end that the whole thing was just an adventure. Amazing, spectacular. I love seeing the despair on everyone's faces. It's delicious. But, everything else just makes this episode feel boring, sluggish, and a waste of time on rewatch. So, moving on. At spot number 6, we have the first episode titled The Pilot. Now, compared to deciding the last 2 spots, this one was so much harder. Like, the ranking itself wasn't so straightforward, but once I decided on spot 8 and 9, I felt good about those 2. But going up, I really contemplated the rankings and kept changing my mind about the placements because it almost felt like every episode was equal and enjoyable in their own regard. But there were still certain things that I could use to decide the final ranking. To actually talk about the episode 1 is very balanced, and it introduces the audience to the circus and gives us a rough idea of what the cast is like. The adventure itself isn't the most interesting, but again, it sets up the expectations for the rest of the show. The way Kaufman's abstraction is depicted in such an unsettling way shows us that the lack of escape isn't the only danger at the circus, giving more stakes than if escaping was the only problem. But now, Pomni not only needs to find out a way out, but also how to avoid abstracting in the process. And that would be so much more interesting than if it's just a regular, you have to escape type story. Speaking of Pomni, I love the way her turmoil is presented. Not only is she in a totally unfamiliar, strange place, but she's also given a brief glimpse of hope through the escape door. And that hope is constantly dangled in front of her face as she goes through each door, only to have it finally snatched away when there's nothing on the other side each time. Her despair is solidified in the masterpiece of the ending scene, beautifully accompanied with the amazing soundtrack as the camera pans out. It really left me, and I think most people that watched that episode, hungry for more. It was truly amazing. And so this was a really good opening for the show, and even though it isn't positioned in the higher ranks, that doesn't mean I value it any less. After all, if the first episode was trash, then The Amazing Digital Circus would have never reached the heights it does in following episodes. Number 5 goes to episode 2, titled Candy Carrier Chaos. Initially, when I started this ranking video, I really thought this episode was going to be in the bottom 2. And I think it's because I had this idea about the older episodes, because it'd been so long since I'd seen them, that they were just mid or just kind of bad in general. And especially because since episode 5, things just kept upping in scale each time. So when I looked at that, and then also the fact that these were earlier episodes, I'm like, there's no way they can be that good. But on rewatch, I realized just how well written some of these earlier episodes actually were. Following from episode 1, this episode continues with the exploration of Pomni adjusting to the circus and coming to terms with her new life. And it does this masterfully through her connection with Gummigu. Having 2 characters whose worlds have recently completely been destroyed, bonding over that, was powerful to watch. I also love all the NPCs in this episode. Gummigu aside, all of them were really fun to watch. The princess played a nice guide who gives you the instructions. Gummigu's gang were silly, making their hijinks fun to watch. Heck, even the sludge, who is literally just a monster made to terrorize the townspeople, was entertaining. It's actually so fun, I can't lie. All the NPCs, despite their limited screen time, felt memorable and lively. And same goes for the world that they were living in. The Candy Kingdom was incredible to look at. The vibrancy and its delectable design. I wouldn't have been mad if we used that location in another episode, but we didn't. And then we got the continued development of the character dynamics between the cast and their own personalities, especially with Kaufman's funeral at the end, which I honestly wish they went into more detail about who he was as a person and his relationship with the other cast members and the effect of his absence. But overall, is a very strong episode, and early in the series at that. At position 4 is episode 5, titled Untitled. Okay, can I just say that I love this episode so much because it's so unique from the others. The theme of adventures constantly changing was so fun to watch and gives it this such a fresh vibe. Every other episode has a clear goal, whether it be completing a specific adventure, escaping the circus, or fixing Kane. But not this one. This one takes you through a multitude of places, some with goals, others just allowing the cast to be themselves. All the adventure segments are so different from each other, allowing us to see the cast members in different lights rapidly, and they all bring entertainment to the table one way or another. My favorite adventures are the stargazing and bartending ones. The stargazing one because the beauty of the star-filled sky and the circus members being able to just admire them while chatting is so enjoyable, as well as the banter between Jax and Pomni. It was so natural and flowed so smoothly at the same time. The bartending one revealed so much about everyone, and the vibes were good throughout. Like, it felt like everyone was getting along and were actually just friends in a way. One of my qualms with this episode is how it's supposedly a Ragatha episode, yet fails to focus on her entirely for the episode. The little crumbs of lore we get of Ragatha comes with bucket loads for Jax, and some of the info we learn about Ragatha is in juxtaposition to Jax. So instead of seeing Ragatha separately as her own person, we see who she is compared to Jax relative to him, which we didn't need. We could have just had solely Ragatha. Another thing, which is not near as important as what I said before, but I kind of hate the fact that we didn't get an evil Gangle. Like, why did everybody else get one except for Gangle? What did my girl do to not get an evil version of herself? Like, Gangle genuinely deserved to have an evil version of herself, and I stand by that. But this episode is great, very interesting, one of my personal faves, but I don't think it's good enough to be higher than placement 4, so it had to be here. Oof, getting into the top 3, rounding out the bottom is episode 3, placed at 3. I keep doing it, but The Mystery of the Milden Hall Manor. Similar to episode 2, I didn't expect this episode to be this high. I expected it to be much lower, actually. Mostly because outside of the Kingdom moments, I didn't remember this episode for anything else. To be frank, the Kingdom moments do heavily carry this episode to its placement on the list, but it isn't the only reason why it's this high up. It's just the main reason, you get me? From the first 2 episodes, it has never been hinted that Kinger is anything but a crazed old man whose role is mainly comic relief. The only thing that was a semblance of him being more than that was the time he'd spent in the circus. Like, he was the oldest member of the circus, as in he'd spent the most time there, so obviously, like, there's some reason why he hasn't gone crazy yet, like, he hasn't abstracted yet, and why he's still there. So to see that he isn't completely crazy, but rather a wise mentor-like character who understands more than he lets on and cares a lot for the circus members was beautiful. Something that made Kinger become one of my favorite characters. This episode is also special because it fed us an idea of what the show would do for its characters. Having an episode focused on a character most people wrote off and expanding on them much more really sold the idea that although Pomni was the protagonist, she wasn't the only important character. This episode gave the amazing digital circus the potential to portray an ensemble cast in which everyone was significant. I can't say they completely delivered on this promise. I mean, in this episode alone, Zubul, who was also supposed to be a focus, hardly got anything. But even just being able to see a glimpse of that potential was exciting. I'm still sad that Zubul's arc is quite shallow in most aspects though. I also dislike how most of the cast outside of King and Pomni were heavily sidelined. And I understand that it was fundamentally necessary so that Kinger could have the spotlight, but in episode 2, even after the group is split up, it doesn't feel like what the others are doing without Pomni is useless. Whereas here, they might as well have not been in the episode and it wouldn't have changed anything. Besides that, the horror atmosphere created for Pomni and Kinger's adventure was really good and felt like it could have been a genuine plot for a horror game or something. In the grand scheme of things, I do think episode 8 and 6 are much stronger and more significant to the main plot of the series. Yes, I gave away my top 2 positions, but like, if you have a brain, then you already knew that. It was just those 2 left anyways. You might be expecting this, but at number 2 I have episode 8, titled well, I'm not gonna read that, so. This is a perfect penultimate episode, beautifully piggybacking off of episode 7 to bring the episode and the series to its climax right before the finale. While the finale itself was underwhelming, the lead up to it sure wasn't. Kane's breakdown was foreshadowed with little sprinkles throughout the episodes leading up to this one. Since episode 3, it's clear that Kane is struggling to cater to the humans' needs, and this starts with Zubul boycotting his adventures. He doesn't really seek a proper solution at first because he assumes it's just a Zubul problem, but he starts to question himself when the others don't particularly enjoy his adventures either, i.e. when everyone preferred the suggestion box ideas more than his own. This becomes even worse when at the award show he finds out that no one voted for him in the Best Character Awards. And the breaking point is in episode 7, when he makes an adventure where all the things he thought they wanted, an escape route, answers what the circus is, real freedom in their lives, and they still hate it, leading him to finally realize that they just hate him. This breaks his psyche, and he rejects their rejection, forcing them into essentially torture games following a musical sequence. What? A musical sequence? Let's talk about that. I'm not someone who really enjoys characters randomly bursting out into song, especially when I'm not watching a musical, but the song and visuals for this one slap so hard and it fits the situation perfectly that not only do I not mind it, I love it. One of my favorite parts about this episode. Other aspects of this episode flail around a bit, but it really did set up the finale with a home run when Ken was deleted. Nobody actually knew what was going to happen after this. Still, I find that the number 1 spot holds much more weight to me emotionally and has qualities that made me personally really love the show. And so that obviously means that at number 1 is episode 6, They All Get Guns. What can I say? I am a funny bunny lover, so this episode had to be first. I'm joking, slightly. I do love the Jackson Pomni scenes. Who wouldn't? In general, this episode just made me so happy. Like, it genuinely filled my inner shipper heart. Not just because of Jackson Pomni, though. It was all the pairings and their interactions that filled me with such joy. Ragatha and Kinger, not romantically, platonically, please. The way Kinger comforted Ragatha and supported her when she was feeling upset in this episode was so touching, and I love to see more people appreciating Kinger and his wisdom. It was giving daddy and daughter. I love that so much. And then Zubul and Gangle. Now, I know I said earlier that their dynamic bored me, but in this episode, it felt really natural and sweet. Zubul encouraging Gangle to be herself and wanting her to have fun was nice. I love that they actually got to have excitement and there was more silliness in this episode, because I can't remember them ever doing anything in any of the other episodes. It is tragic, really. But in this one, they're having a gunfight with their kinda sorta friends in this weird digital circus. So me hating them before wasn't just my dislike for the pairing, but rather how they were acting in the other episodes. Like, trust, I actually do like Abstragedy. The whole concept of having a free-for-all was so silly, which is exactly what I love about the Amazing Digital Circus. The ridiculousness and the nonsensical nature of it that's what makes the show what it is. And seeing King take the backseat was great too. Like, we could see the characters be themselves a lot more. And I've already mentioned this, but I still want to give it some love. The end credit scene where he opens the ballot to see he got no votes, just a great way to show his confidence in pleasing the humans breaking. Like, him losing confidence in himself as the ringmaster of the circus. My favorite moment has to be, well, I told you I was a funny bunny shipper, so what do you think it is? Take a guess. What was it? Obviously, it was the argument scene. Yes, it's so angsty. Yes, it's Jax being an asshole. But it was a good emotional climax for Jax and Palmy's relationship. And regardless if you think there's something more between them than just like friends or acquaintances or whatever, you have to admit that their relationship is an important part for both of their characters. So Seeing it come to a head here was enticing. There's even a few Ragatha and Pomni interactions, which is probably one of the only things I have to gripe on this episode. I wish there was a lot more meaningful moments for them in this episode. I know we can't have it all, but the most we got was at the end when they agreed to talk after the award show. That's it. And I'm fine leaving it at that and not directly seeing the talk on camera, but we don't even see the effects of this talk on screen. The next episode is just back to normal essentially, when the relationship should have actually developed further. I don't know if I mentioned this before, I think I forgot, low-key, but because there isn't much development to Jester at all, their scene in episode 9 feels so out of nowhere. Like, they were friends, but they were talking as if they were lifelong soulmates, which was a picture that was never given to us. Back to episode 6 though, even with that one issue, which is kinda nitpicky because there could have been more Jester Doll scenes in any episode. It's just that this one had the best opportunities to give them to us, especially after their falling out in the previous episode. I still think it did great for the other character dynamics it displayed, and that's what I love this episode for and why I think it's the best Amazing Digital Circus episode. To end it off, I just want to say a few extra things about the show in general. I know not everyone, but there was a lot of people, myself included, that had high expectations for the show and were let down by it, how it ended, because it didn't go as high as we wanted it to. Picking up off of what I said about Pomni Ragatha, that's just one example of a missed character dynamic. A lot of the pairings in the show are underdeveloped or underexplored. Like, to be honest, there's only like 4 relationships that I feel like are actually even developed through the runtime of the series. That's Jax and Pomni, Pomni Ragatha, kind of, not really, and then Zubul and Gangle. And that's 3. I said 4, but I can low-key only think of 3. One of them that hardly even counts in my opinion. And they don't need to explore every single combination of characters, but there are so many that get nothing and others that are very minimally explored. For example, Jax and Ragatha, the final episode spends so much time focusing on him and Pomni when Ragatha was also important to him at some point. It's kind of sad how in his flashbacks, recalling his moments with Ribbit and Kaufmo, we see times when he actually was friends with Ribbit and Kaufmo. We never see that for Ragatha. We only see him pushing her away. I wish we could have explored the side of Jax where he was actually nice to Ragatha and treated her like a friend. Because according to her, they did used to be friends, and I can believe that after seeing his moments with Ribbit and Kaufmo, but we never actually saw it. Even if we didn't go with the friendship route of the relationship, even just showing him more as an abuser would have been better. Same goes for Gangle, not the friendship side obviously, but the abuser side. Another example is Ragatha not being close with either Zubul or Gangle. They don't all have to be best friends, but we hardly see Gangle and Zubul interacting positively with anyone other than themselves. There are probably reasons for their distant relations, but we don't get to know because it just had to be the Jax show. Which brings me to one of my biggest disappointments. I started watching The Amazing Digital Circus last year when episode 5 was released, so I joined halfway through, and I won't lie when I say I high-key joined solely due to the Jax and Funny Bunny propaganda. So at the time, I was fine with the show's heavy focus on Jax. In fact, I liked it to a point, but it wasn't until after I rewatched it and saw how the show made you think it actually cared about all its characters. For it to not deliver on that makes me so disappointed. Not to say that Jax is a garbage character, he's not perfect. He's not perfectly written at all, but I do like how some aspects of him were depicted and displayed. It's just too much though. If it was made obvious from the start that he was going to be the main character and the character that got the main focus and all the spotlight, even till the end, then it wouldn't have been so bad. But they actually made us think that everyone was going to get the same treatment, and just did not happen. Outside of that, a lot of the stuff about the circus is left unanswered or just forgotten. Like, I'm pretty sure we never learned the purpose of the circus. Was it just to train the AI? And maybe I'm actually tweaking for that point, but we also never know, like, is the circus gonna remain indefinitely open? Is it just gonna stay there forever? Can people still join the circus to this day? Like, I'm asking for a lot, high key. I can see that. And A show doesn't have to answer every question that it lays out, but some of them really should have been. We never got a follow-up on how abstraction came into being, or even anything more about Scratch, which was at least the one thing I feel like they should have answered. It is a trend nowadays for shows to not live up to their potentials. Straight up potential, mans, I say. I still enjoyed watching The Amazing Digital Circus, and I don't regret watching it at all. But as a fan, I wasn't left completely satisfied. No hate to Gooseworks though. I think she did the best she could, and I'm glad that she created the show in the first place. But yeah, that's it for now, guys. Toodles!